it started 34 years ago when my dad said to me, look, if you're going to work with me, there's one rule and only one rule. And I said, all right, I can deal with that. That's no problem. What's that? He says, you'll buy something, gold or silver, every 2 weeks when you get paid. I thought if that was the only rule, I could deal with it. Now, I've owned the company pretty much outright for the last 2 decades, and he won't fire me anymore. But I have honored my promise to him, and I bought something every 2 weeks for 34 years. You see, I look at gold and silver not as an investment, and I think it's important to say that at the beginning of this conversation for your people who are listening, because to me, it's wealth. It's wealth that has outlived 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic, anything that's ever been thrown at it. And so to me, what gold and silver is just pure and simple wealth. And that rule, that gift, if you will, that my father gave me was literally the best gift that anyone has ever given me. And the same would be true for accumulating Bitcoin as well. It's to pay yourself first and to always make sure that you pay yourself first, because otherwise you never get off the wheel. You never get out of the rat race. And here we are 34 years later. And I guess we'll see what happens in the future, but it's good to be here nonetheless.
Well, what a great story. I remember you sharing that during a lunch that we had. And one of the reasons I wanted you on the show is I could tell from the stories that you shared that you are really someone of integrity who cares about the customers. Like you mentioned, you don't want anyone to have any issues. There are so many scams in this world out there, and you really do care about people protecting their savings and protecting what could be generational wealth. Is there a reason why you guys focused on this industry in particular? Like, is there some sort of family story that got you really interested in gold and precious metals?
Not really. The first few years of our company, we focused on Swiss investments, and we did really for the last 34 years, little less and less and less and less. But when we started the company, we were the U.S. contact for the Swiss insurance industry, and we were helping people get invested in Swiss annuities, Swiss gold accounts, Swiss banking. And we realized very, very quickly that the same person that bought Swiss francs purchased precious metals. So no, I mean, not really. It kind of just happened by osmosis. And very quickly we realized that precious metals had a broader base, a greater demand than the Swiss franc investments did. And it's just kind of morphed into primarily precious metals, although we do a little bit with Swiss investments still. But it was kind of by happenstance more than anything.
Okay, so let's first start out with your area of expertise, which is gold and silver. They've really been breaking out in the last few weeks, and I'd love to hear your take on where we're at now and where you think things are going, given the macro environment that we're in, the geopolitical issues at hand. So talk to us about gold.
Yeah, again, when you take a look at gold, to me, the thing to keep in mind is that it's, I don't know, I guess you could say it's the tortoise, not the hare. It moves slowly and methodically. And, you go back to the beginning of the century, go back to 2000, over the last 24 years, it's appreciated roughly by 7.8% per year, very slowly, very methodically. But a couple of things that I would say as you look at gold that really resonate with me. Number one, in 2019, the most well-funded and well-informed and sophisticated and powerful bank on the planet, the Bank of International Settlements, which is really viewed as the central bank, reclassified gold as the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset. Now, that's very important to me, because when you realize that really over the last 6 or 7 years, we've seen the central banks of the world, who I would say are not only the most well-funded, but more importantly, the most well-informed traders on the planet, have not only gone on a repatriation spree where they are repatriating all of their gold holdings, both from the New York Fed and the Bank of England, but also on a purchasing spree to where over the last 3 years in particular, the most well-informed traders on the planet have accumulated more gold than at any time in the last 100 years. So I think the most important thing when we talk about gold is that it is important enough to be reclassified the only other tier 1 reserve asset other than dollars or treasuries, and important enough to be accumulated by the central banks at a level we've never seen before. And really, again, a very important topic in this removal of counterparty risk. We've seen a tremendous amount of repatriation of gold from these hubs And I think that's very, very relevant in the time that we are heading into. And I know that that's a constant theme with Bitcoin as well, is an asset that is not simultaneously someone else's liability. And I think that's very important here, because if the central banks were just buying and leaving it at the Fed and leaving it at the Bank of England, it would have less impact on me. But to see them repatriate it and to have constantly gold and silver being bled dry out of the LBMA and the COMEX and shipping eastward, to me, says a lot about where we are. So again, I think the best is certainly ahead for gold. But one of the problems that people have with gold is that it moves in a very methodical fashion. It isn't instant gratification, but it has been moving slowly and steadily. And when we look at silver, I mean, I look at an asset, to me, that the phrase that comes to mind is asymmetrical risk reward. And it has maybe the best asymmetrical risk reward position I've ever seen in any asset. And that simply means, what asset can you own that has the lowest downside risk with the greatest upside potential? And when you look at silver, look, it's coming out of the ground right now at a ratio of 7-1, silver to gold. And for 5,000 years, that was 16-1, the ratio. So it's depleting in nature, and it's found in a form called epithermal, very near the surface, as your skin is epidural, epithermal meaning it's right near the surface. So the big deposits were found literally decades ago. And so what you see is an asset that is increasing in demand in green and digital applications. It's experienced a renaissance in monetary applications, and yet it is decreasing in nature. In fact, of the 1 billion ounces that came to market last year, roughly only 300 million came from companies that mine silver. The majority of all the silver that came to market came from byproduct mining of other metals that are completely off the radar of anyone looking for silver. They're mining gold or copper or lead or zinc, and they stumble across it, and a little bit of recycling. So it's an asset that is historically, in terms of its price relationship to gold, in terms of its geologic relationship, 5,000 years, it's way out of whack. And I think it might be one of the best investments I've ever seen. And again, at the beginning, I mentioned that to me, silver and gold are wealth, and I believe that to be true about silver, but an asset that is so copiously needed in so many areas. And, it's interesting, too, that the military industrial complex is an interesting topic. And I think it's worth mentioning in silver, because, when I saw you at that conference in Vancouver, I had been there the year before. And the year before, I had made a comment in my speech that there's roughly 500 ounces of silver in the tip of every Tomahawk cruise missile. And there was a man there that introduced himself to me, and he never really told me what he did. Well, he was there again on this last meeting, and he came up to me and he said, listen, I heard you say that last year. Actually, I'm a consultant for the Department of Defense, and I actually worked on the Patriot missile program. And he showed me all sorts of pictures. He said, don't worry, this is declassified. He said, but you're right. There's between 13 and 15 kilograms of silver in the tip of every Tomahawk cruise missile. And I asked myself, why is it that military applications for silver is not listed in the Silver Institute supply demand figure? And you look at the amount of munitions that are being issued across the globe, and the military industrial complex that is supplying those munitions, whether it be to the United States or to the Ukraine or wherever it may be. And you ask yourself, why would 3 or 4 commercial banks be short the largest concentrated short position on any commodity traded on the COMEX in silver? Why would Bank of America be short 1 billion ounces of silver? Why in God's green earth would they ever do that? And the answer is certainly, you're talking about, I think, a constant need to hold the price down to fund wars all across the globe. And if you need silver in high-tech weaponry, in aerospace, then certainly you don't want it to be taking off. And when you look at an asset that is so out of whack, it's so out of whack historically, geologically, in every single way, logically, to me, it presents a very, very compelling argument that it should be owned. And I think the best is certainly ahead for silver. Even technically, we're looking at right now on the cusp of breaking out of a many, many year consolidation pattern, and it just popped above it. So, who knows where it goes from here, but certainly I think it is the most undervalued asset and underappreciated asset on the planet.